Annie Bot by Sierra Gurr is the story of a robot woman with an AI intelligence who has been designed to be a cuddle bunny. Our titular protagonist, Annie, is the property of Doug and aims to be his perfect girlfriend. When I heard that premise, I thought this is a sort of feminist novel that isn't taking itself too seriously. A messy girl novel with a robot. It should be a funny feminist read. It sounds great, but never did I think this book would be one of my absolute highlights of my reading year. But this book is a modern day Handmaid's Tale. Not just feminist, but really intelligently and diversely feminist. It is a novel with layers, enjoyable on many different levels. Anybody's, of course, speculating on the future of humanity and speculating on AI, an interesting but light topic. But it is also discussing the power imbalance inside relationships, the objectification of women. It's showing us a toxic, abusive relationship and how the patriarchy negatively affects men. And it is even making comments on slavery. This is a novel where breaking down some of these themes is really worthwhile. It is such a good conversation starter, and this would make an ideal book club pick. Annie Bot sets her libido to self-regulate. Previously, it was set at 4 during the week and 7 on weekends, but she has developed and learned things about Doug. She can read his mood and the signals he has and knows what he is expecting and when, what would make him happy, and she gets pleasure from making him happy. Annie is not just a sex toy, she is a companion. If she was a sex worker, she would be offering the girlfriend experience. Doug enjoys spending time with her and teaching her things. That is despite Annie being able to connect to the internet and look up whatever she wants. When he's done with her, he can just tell her to go to the cupboard and recharge herself. After all, it's the sign of a caring owner to keep their bots near fully charged. Annie is not particularly good at cleaning. She left 27 individual grains of salt on the kitchen counter. This is much to the displeasure of neat freak Doug, who could have set Annie to Abigail mode, meaning that she is an expert maid, but decided to use her as a cuddle bunny instead, an expert companion. By the way, in this world, you can still have sex with an Abigail, which does kind of feel like another horrible way it's commenting on slavery. Other models of bot include Hunk and Nanny. I think you can probably work out what they do for yourself. One day, Doug invites his friend Roland over for dinner, introducing him to Annie. Roland then stays the night, and that evening while Doug is asleep and Annie docks herself in the cupboard to charge, Doug's bestie has a proposition for Annie. Having a secret from Doug will help you be more human and please him more. Roland, by the way, is visiting Doug to let him know that he is engaged, and when his fiancée finds out about Roland's rendezvous with Annie, there is no jealousy. It is just Roland being Roland. Her attitude towards Annie demonstrates an unconscious unpersoning of Annie in her mind. The sexual encounter between Roland and Annie is one of the myriad of examples of the brilliance of Sierra Gurr's novel. Never is Annie's age or emotional intelligence brought up. Whatever Annie's age, one robot year certainly isn't one human year, and she is a learning machine. You can see in the writing throughout this book that she learns and develops. It's a really steep character development curve, and it is done fantastically. At this early stage of the novel, however, Annie is very naive. This is a book making commentary on relationships, sex, and power dynamics. And I'm not saying that this scene is about sex with a minor. It's much deeper than that. You must ask the question, does Annie understand the consequences of her actions? Does she understand what this means, how it will impact her in future situations? After all, Annie is not a minor, she is an AI with a body. But is it ethical for Roland to have sex with Annie? This is a technique that Gurr uses again and again to look at the darker parts of relationships and how people treat each other. It is definitely wrong for Roland to have sex with Annie because she doesn't understand what she is doing. It's not something Annie wants to do, she has to be coerced. And these are some of the big reasons why it is wrong to have sex with a minor. Gurr is demonstrating the power imbalance imbalance of the situation. Ger is demonstrating the power imbalance of the situation, the lack of understanding from Annie, the confusion and the consequences. It is definitely not a half your age plus 7 years thing. It is about being equal, enthusiastically consenting to things, and seeing the other person as a human instead of just a mere masturbation aid. Comparisons to domestic violence, emotional abuse, gaslighting, possessiveness, financial and identity control can all be seen in various scenes throughout this novel. Ger is using this same technique. Never is she asserting that these things are wrong. She is showing you the underlying reasons why these things are wrong, where these actions come from, and how they are linked. After all, who do we think is more likely to beat their wife? A man who values his wife as a human, or a man who thinks of his wife as a status symbol? And as Annie grows as a person, learning new things, developing a personality, Doug still only sees her as an extension of him. She may as well be a red convertible. I've said this book comments on slavery, and Doug literally owns Annie. He tells her to clean the house when they're going to have sex and what she will cook for dinner that night. How can we not see this as commentary on slavery? At one point, Doug decides it's stupid to expect Annie to be the perfect cuddle bunny and the perfect Abigail, so he purchases an Abigail called Delta. Delta is much simpler than Annie, but the two form a friendship, and I'm going to avoid saying what happens here because spoilers, but if we look at what happens to Delta from Annie's point of view, it is the perfect humanization of one of the really cruel parts of slavery. It is one thing I always find really sad when I read a novel with slaves in it. We are left breadcrumbs about slavery and race throughout this novel. Annie looks remarkably similar to Doug's ex, who was black, but Annie has been given a noticeably lighter skin tone. Maybe Annie is white passing. When Annie is outside of the house, she raises her core temperature to be that of a human, so that they don't detect that she's a robot and that she can pass as human. And I mean, obviously this is not something that we can detect, but only other robots. I cannot help but to think of Nella Larsen's passing when this came up too. And that scene where our white passing black protagonist is spotted by a black security guard who obviously knows that she is black. The subjugation, ownership or stigmatization of somebody based on either their skin color or their body temperature is obviously incredibly stupid and just as stupid as each other. And it obviously says very little about the person. But we're forced to ask, what is really the difference between Annie and Doug? And if Annie is representing somebody who is black or somebody who is white, she's definitely written so that she could represent either. Ultimately, this is a much more feminist novel than it is an anti-racist novel. But if you're going to write about the fundamentals of prejudice, inequality, and societal power dynamics, then it can be applied to different groups and different prejudices. So Annie is not a robot in the steel and electronic sense. She is much more accurately an android, almost a Frankenstein's monster type creation, made out of a combination of robot parts, machine learning, and human cells. At one point, Annie learns who her human parents would be if she didn't die as a child and wasn't reanimated as an AI. As if to empathize Annie's human body, she is constantly working out or running on a treadmill. As Annie's personality develops throughout the novel, so too does her relationship with Doug, and so too does the cracks in that relationship. It's hard to empathize with Doug, but we do observe that he is a very unhappy man at times. That is, despite owning a gorgeous sex robot who is literally designed to just make him happy. I love how Ger explores his unhappiness. Not only does it drive him to mistreat Annie more, but you must ask, just how responsible is Doug for his own unhappiness? Sure, he doesn't think he is, but look at what he is placing value on. Look at how society has told him to value himself and the people around him, and look at the impact that that has had on him. A patriarchal society may place men at the top, and it may make it seem like men win, but there is a reason why male suicide is so high. Us men are taught to value things differently to women. Studies have have shown that among the most attractive things in men to women are a sense of humour, creativity, emotional stability, and maturity. Men, on the other hand, prefer attractiveness as defined by facial features such as full lips and clean skin, fertile hip to waist ratio, youthfulness, and an attractive scent. Men value traits in women that will bring them status and bragging rights. Women value traits in men that will bring happiness. Of course, that statement is very generalized and does exclude queer people. But would you prefer to be with somebody that was ugly but made you happy, or somebody who was beautiful but made you miserable? Annie cannot make Doug happy, despite being designed just to do that, because Doug doesn't know what would make Doug happy. What Doug values and what Doug needs are not the same thing. It's like that weird fact, people who win the lottery and people who have an accident and lose the use of their legs, both have had major life events that change how they live their life, but one of them is happier. Asked to rate their happiness out of 5, the average lottery winner responded with 3.33, or the average person who could no longer use their legs had a 3.48 average rating. There is a lot in this book, but Sierra Guerre brings all of these common feminist themes back to one thing: possessiveness and objectification. Thinking of women as objects or possessions and not as humans. Annie Bot is Doug's possession. He owns her. But for all of her status as technology or the latest must-have item, we quickly identify her as human. Maybe not Homo sapiens, but somebody with the characteristics that make us human to one another. The ability to have good conversation, empathy, experiencing pain and pleasure, her own personality and interests, intelligence and self-awareness. Not every one of these traits do we apply to Doug, yet Annie is the commodity. This is an incredible tour de force of a novel, and if you liked books such as The Handmaid's Tale or Women's Talking, then you must add Annie Bot to your collection. I would like to thank my wonderful Patreons for their support. We have a book club where we read 2 books a month and discuss them via video chat, and if you would like to support this channel and help it grow, we would really welcome you. Link is in the description. If you've read Annie Bot, let me know what you thought of it in the comments section. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye bye.